blade was already out of my wrist before my target turned around, and in that single heartbeat, 400 years of perfect work should have ended his life. It did not. That failure is the reason I am telling you this story now, from a place where names no longer matter, and time moves differently than it once did for me. I was built for one purpose, not born, not raised, built. The Valkyrie Guild took infants from a dozen dying colonies and shaped them into something the galaxy would pay tritium and gold for. I was the sharpest result of that shaping. 341 contracts, completed without a single failure, without a single witness left to describe my face. I did not feel fear, because fear had been carved out of me before I could speak. I did not feel doubt, because doubt was inefficient. I only felt the clean, cold satisfaction of a task, finished exactly as planned. The contract that changed everything arrived the way all my contracts arrived, hidden inside a shipping manifest, passed through 3 brokers who never knew each other's names. The target was a human named Oliver Hart, listed as a logistics coordinator on a mining station called Cassandra 9, orbiting a moon that had died of cold 1,000 years before anyone came to dig through its bones. There was no military file on him, no political record, no obvious reason a man like that should be worth guild-level payment. I did not need a reason. I needed coordinates and a fee, and both were already in my hand. I reached Cassandra 9 wearing the shape of a maintenance technician, a biomimetic layer of synthetic skin stretched over what I truly am. It would fool cameras, it would fool casual eyes, it would fool almost anything short of a full medical scanner, and stations like this one rarely had those working properly. I spent 6 hours learning the rhythm of the place before I moved, the guard rotations, the air recyclers, the exact second the corridor lights dimmed for the night cycle. Preparation was the only thing I had ever truly believed in, and it had never once betrayed me. Oliver Hart worked alone in a cargo bay that smelled of oil and cold metal, humming some tuneless song under his breath while he checked delivery logs on a cracked handheld screen. He was unremarkable in every visible way, soft around the middle, slow on his feet, the kind of man armies overlook and history forgets. I remember thinking the whole encounter would take 4 seconds from the moment I stepped out of the shadows. It took 4 seconds, only not in the way I had planned. I came from behind a stack of storage crates, my forearm blade extended and aimed for the base of his skull, the exact point where every dossier on human anatomy told me the nervous system was catastrophically exposed. I had used this strike 83 times before, on 83 different targets, in 83 different rooms across 9 systems. It had never once failed to end things instantly. Oliver turned around. Not fast, not with any warning that should have mattered. He turned the way a tired man turns to check a noise behind him, and the strike that should have opened the base of his skull instead scraped harmlessly across a shoulder that had already begun to move. I adjusted mid-motion, the way I had been trained to adjust 1,000 times before, and drove my second strike toward his throat. His hand caught my wrist before the blade arrived. I need you to understand how impossible that should have been. My strength was not simply greater than his. It belonged to an entirely different category of physics. Engineered fiber and neural acceleration, built to end fights before they began. And yet his fingers closed around my wrist and held it, not with panic, not with the wild strength of a cornered animal, but with something calm and stubborn that I had never encountered in any species before. "You are stronger than you look," he said, almost like he was making conversation over a cup of coffee, while my arm strained uselessly against his grip. I broke free. I always break free. I drove my knee into his side with enough force to crack support struts in a bulkhead, and he staggered, breath leaving him in a sharp grunt, but he did not fall. He planted his feet and stayed upright, one hand pressed to his ribs, his face twisted in discomfort rather than terror. "Okay," he muttered, mostly to himself. "That one actually hurt. I do not know fear. It was removed from me before I learned to walk, but standing in that cargo bay, watching a soft, slow, unremarkable man refuse to fall down the way every single calculation said he should, I felt something adjacent to it. A cold, spinning sensation, like watching every model of the universe I had ever trusted collapse at once. He hit me only once. I do not remember choosing to fall. I only remember the ceiling light swimming above me, and the sound of my own breath, ragged in a way it had never been before. When my vision cleared, he was crouched over me, and he had pulled the mask from my face with a strange, careful gentleness, as if he were checking on an injured animal rather than the assassin who had just tried to end his life. He looked at what lay beneath the false skin, the layered violet tone, the second set of eyelids, the features that had made grown soldiers scream and run in every other encounter I had ever had. Oliver did not scream. He sighed, the way a man sighs at an unexpected bill. "Guild sent you," he said. It was not really a question. I said nothing. 400 years of training had given me no protocol for this exact moment. Figured as much, he continued, still rubbing his ribs. You can tell whoever is paying for this that my answer is still no. I am not selling them the mineral rights under this station, not now, and not after they send someone else either. I lay there, unable to move, and asked the only question that mattered to me in that instant. Why was he not dead? He considered the question the way humans consider things that genuinely puzzle them, tilting his head slightly, eyes narrowing in thought. I grew up somewhere that tried very hard to make sure I did not see 16, he said quietly. You get used to people expecting you to fall down, after a while. Eventually you stop being very good at it. He let me go. He crouched there a moment longer, looking at me with an expression that was not quite pity, and not quite respect. Some third thing I have still never found a proper word for in any language I know. Then he said, "Go home. Tell them to send someone who wants this more than I want to protect it." I left Cassandra 9 that night with my contract unfulfilled for the first time in 412 years. I did not run, because running from failure had never been part of my training either. I simply walked back to my ship and sat in the pilot's chair for 6 hours without moving, replaying the 4 seconds that had unmade everything I believed about myself. The guild does not forgive failure, and it did not take them long to send word. My handler, a sharp-voiced woman named Grace Bellamy who had overseen every contract I had ever completed, contacted me through the usual channel, her voice tight with something I had never heard from her before. Concern, perhaps, or disappointment, or both at once. "Explain it to me again," she said. "You are telling me one unarmed logistics worker put you on the floor." "He is not what the file said he was," I told her. "The file is wrong." "The file came from 3 separate sources," Grace said. "The file does not get to be wrong." I had no answer for that either. I only knew what my own body remembered. The strength in that grip, the calm in that voice, the strange stillness of a man who had clearly decided long ago that he would rather stand and be hurt than kneel and be safe. The guild sent a second operative within the week, a quiet, efficient man named Edmund Voss, who had never failed a contract of his own. I was ordered to observe from a distance, to record what happened, to learn from any mistake I might have made so it would not be repeated. I did as I was told, hovering in the shadow of a supply ship docked 2 berths away from Cassandra 9, watching through a long-range scanner as Edmund made his approach. He was faster than I had been. He struck without hesitation, without the small delay of surprise that had cost me the fight. Oliver still turned in time. He still caught the strike on a raised forearm instead of his throat, and when Edmund pressed forward, certain of victory, Oliver simply did not stop moving forward himself, absorbing blow after blow with the grim patience of a man who had spent his whole life being underestimated and had long since stopped minding it. Edmund did not walk away afterward. He was carried, unconscious, back to the very ship that had brought him, and the guild marked the contract as failed a second time. I understood then that this was never going to be a question of strength or speed or training. Oliver Hart was not hiding some secret weapon or hidden augmentation. He was simply a man who had built himself, piece by piece, out of every disadvantage life had ever handed him, until the very idea of staying down had stopped making sense to his body. The guild called a council after Edmund's failure, a rare and serious thing, reserved only for contracts that threatened the reputation of the entire organization. I was summoned to stand before them, not as an assassin anymore, but as evidence. They wanted to know what I had seen, what I had felt, whether the target possessed some hidden technology that could explain 2 consecutive failures against their best operatives. I told them the truth, because lying had never been part of my design either. I told them there was no hidden technology. I told them Oliver Hart was exactly what his file said he was, a soft-spoken, unremarkable man who happened to have decided, somewhere in his past, that he would rather break than bend. The council did not like that answer. A voice among them, cold and precise, ordered a full station strike instead of another quiet contract, a plan that would have cost dozens of innocent lives, simply to end one man who refused to be afraid of us. That was the moment something inside me, already cracked since that cargo bay, finally broke all the way open. I do not remember deciding to object. I only remember standing in that council chamber and telling them no, telling them that 400 years of perfect work had earned me the right to refuse one order, and that I was refusing this one. They marked me for termination that same hour. I expected nothing less. What I did not expect was the strange calm that settled over me once the decision was made, a quiet I had never felt in 4 centuries of service. I left the council chamber, boarded a transport, and set a course back toward Cassandra 9, not to finish my contract, but to warn the one man who had ever managed to stop me. I found Oliver in the same cargo bay, checking the same cracked handheld screen, humming the same tuneless song, as though nothing about that night had changed him at all. He looked up when I entered, and to my surprise, he did not reach for a weapon or call for security. He simply set the screen down and studied me for a long moment. "You are back," he said. "They are planning to attack the station," I told him. "Not a quiet contract this time. A full strike, to remove every witness along with you." He absorbed that information the way he absorbed everything, without panic, without wasted motion. Then he nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected for a long time. "You came here to tell me that, knowing what it would cost you," he said. "They marked me for termination the moment I refused the order," I said. There was nothing left to lose. He studied me for a long while after that, the way he had studied me on the floor of that same cargo bay months earlier, with that same strange mixture of curiosity and quiet respect. Then he held out his hand, not as a weapon, not as a threat, simply as a gesture I did not fully understand until he explained it. "Where I come from," he said, "we call this an alliance. Together we evacuated the station's small crew through an old maintenance corridor few people even remembered existed, guided by maps Oliver had apparently memorized years before any of this began. When the Guild strike force finally arrived, they found empty corridors and silent cargo bays, and no trace of the man they had been sent to erase. I never returned to the Guild after that night. I could not go back to what I had been, and I no longer wanted to. Oliver and I parted ways at a quiet trade station on the edge of a system with no name worth remembering, and though I never saw him again after that day, I never forgot him either. I have thought about that cargo bay 1,000 times since, not with anger, and not with the desire to try again and finally succeed where I had failed. I think about it the way you might think about a law of physics you never knew existed until the moment it broke every instrument you owned. I was built to be the deadliest thing in 9 systems, and for 400 years that was exactly what I was. Then I met one quiet, unremarkable man who had simply forgotten, somewhere long before I ever arrived, how to stay down. And in the space of 4 seconds, everything I had ever believed about myself came apart, and something better was allowed to grow in its place.